The school door came off its bottom hinge, while 23 children were still inside. Eleanor Vale caught it before it struck a boy at the front bench, and the county inspector standing behind her said, "This room closes at sundown." By noon, everyone in Cottonwood Crossing knew. The classroom was a rented freight shed behind the feed store, with warped boards, 2 narrow windows, and a roof patched with flattened kerosene tins. Eleanor had taught there for 11 months, because no better place existed. Now even that was gone. The territorial inspector gave the district 7 weeks. If Cottonwood Crossing could not present a safe, permanent school by the autumn assessment, the children would be assigned to districts miles apart. That evening, Mason's Hall was packed. Farmers stood along the walls. Mothers held smaller children on their laps. Men argued about lumber and taxes. Eleanor sat near the front with her lesson slate across her knees. "Land is the first problem," the council chairman said. "Without land, the rest is talk." A chair scraped near the back. Caleb Mercer stood. He was 38, broad through the shoulders, dressed in a plain work shirt with machine grease darkening one cuff. "I have 6 acres along my eastern boundary," he said, "beside the old relay station. Use it for the school." The chairman smiled. "Mr. Mercer, that is generous." "It is land," Caleb said, "not generosity." Eleanor raised one hand. "Who controls the school once it is built?" The chairman blinked. "The district, naturally." Eleanor kept looking at Caleb. "The building will stand on his land." Caleb crossed his arms. "And? I will not move 23 children into a school that can disappear the first time the owner dislikes what is taught inside it." The room shifted. Caleb studied her. "So you think I would throw children out because I lost an argument? I do not know you well enough to know what you would do." That landed harder than an insult. Caleb faced the chairman. "Put it in the agreement. The district controls the school building and its daily use. My ranch has no authority over teaching, hiring, or who sits at the desks." Eleanor's pencil stopped. "Anything else?" Caleb asked. "Yes, we need access from the county track without crossing your cattle lots. There is an old wagon road." "Then that goes in writing too." Caleb nodded. "Fine." By the time the meeting ended, the district had land. What it did not have was a school. At sunrise, Eleanor rode out to inspect the parcel. Caleb was already there. The abandoned relay station sat low against the pale New Mexico ground. 3 adobe walls still stood almost to roof height. A 4th leaned outward. Eleanor dismounted with a rolled chalk line beside her satchel. "You planning to teach arithmetic to the walls?" Caleb asked. "I am planning to measure them. They are coming down." She looked at him. "All of them?" "Most." "Why?" "Because I have eyes." She walked past him. Inside, cool air held under the adobe. Eleanor measured the long wall, then the width. Caleb leaned against the doorway. "You could build a clean frame structure in half the trouble." "With what lumber?" "I can supply it." "That is not the question." He straightened. "The district has almost no money," she said. "If you supply every board and every worker, then we do not have a school. We have Mr. Mercer's building. You make help sound dangerous. Help can become authority quickly." Caleb's face hardened. "My land is already under it. And I thanked you by accepting it." That nearly pulled a smile from him. A ranch hand named Will came through the rear opening carrying a pry bar. Caleb pointed to the leaning wall. "Start there." Eleanor stepped between Will and the adobe. "Not yet." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Miss Vale." She crouched and brushed dirt from the wall's base. The lower courses were thick and dry. The crack above had opened where an old roof beam had failed, but the stone footing beneath it had not shifted. "The foundation is sound. The wall is leaning, because it has no brace. And you know this because I spent 2 summers helping my uncle repair adobe houses outside Santa Fe." She pointed to the footing. "Brace it. Replace the missing beam. If it still moves, take it down." Caleb pressed his palm against the lower adobe, then walked outside and studied the angle. Finally, he called to Will. "Bring 2 long timbers. We brace it first. Eleanor returned to her slate. You expected me to argue, Caleb said. I expected you to decide. Those are different things. They should be. This time he smiled. By midday, 6 families had arrived. Eleanor showed them where the classroom could fit. Caleb explained which roof poles could be cut nearby. Then they counted workers. Harvest work would begin soon. 2 men had freight contracts. Several families could give 1 day a week, no more. Eleanor recalculated. Caleb watched her erase the same number twice. How bad? 7 weeks. I know. We have labor for perhaps 4. I can send ranch hands. No. His expression cooled. Not for free, she said. Your cattle still need tending. If this school survives only because you neglect your ranch for it, sooner or later you will resent the school. You tell people what they will resent often? Only when they volunteer to prove me right. Caleb looked toward the unfinished walls. We need another way. Yes. It was the first time either of them had said we. Late that afternoon, Eleanor drove a stake into the floor near the western wall. She hooked her chalk line around it and crossed the room. Caleb took the reel from her. Where? 14 feet. 13 feet, 8 inches gives the stove more clearance, and steals space from the smaller desks. 4 inches. 23 children notice 4 inches. He looked down the line. She held her end steady. Outside, a hammer struck one of the new braces into place. Caleb adjusted his grip. We settle it tomorrow. Eleanor did not release the line. Together? He looked across the empty room at her. Together. Between them, the chalk cord stayed pulled tight across the dirt floor. By the 3rd week, the old relay station no longer looked abandoned. Fresh adobe filled the worst cracks. New roof poles rested across the repaired walls. A canvas awning stretched from the eastern side, where Eleanor taught arithmetic every morning, while hammers sounded behind her. 7 times 6? 42, the children answered. A wagon rolled past carrying clay. Caleb was driving it. Eleanor watched him guide the team beside the mixing pit, climb down, and take a shovel without telling anyone where to stand. That was new. At the beginning, Caleb had approached every problem as if the answer needed his name attached to it. Now he simply worked. Not everyone could. The Barlow family had no money to donate. Mrs. Barlow apologized for it twice before Eleanor stopped her. Can you cook? For 30 people. Then you can contribute. An older farmer named Jacob Perry could no longer climb ladders, but he owned a mule team. Eleanor assigned him hauling. A widow with 2 daughters offered eggs. Another family cut roofing poles. By the end of the week, Eleanor had written every contribution on a board inside the school, not the dollar value. The work. Caleb stood studying the list. You made an economy out of favors. I made a school out of what people actually have. You know a paid crew would move faster. Yes. We have 4 weeks. I know. Caleb looked toward 2 fathers mixing clay beside their sons. You are willing to risk the deadline for this. I am willing to risk the deadline so the school still belongs to them after we meet it. He rubbed dried mud from his thumb. You always have an answer. No, I simply answer quickly enough that you think I do. That drew a short laugh from him. Eleanor returned to the doorway they had argued over. They had settled on 13 feet 10 inches. Neither had won. She fastened one end of the chalk line to a nail. Hold this. Caleb caught the reel. They stretched the cord across the new threshold. 1/2 inch left, Eleanor said. You are looking crooked. I am standing straight. Those are not the same thing. She gave him a look. He moved the reel. Their hands met over the brass housing. Neither spoke. For 1 second, Caleb's fingers remained beneath hers. Then Eleanor took the reel and stepped backward. Now it is straight. Caleb cleared his throat. 1/2 inch. I told you. He went outside to cut another brace. The next morning, Amos Rusk arrived. His flour mill stood farther downstream, where the creek narrowed between 2 rocky banks. Nearly every family in Cottonwood Crossing used his mill. Several also owed him money. Rusk walked through the worksite in a clean brown vest that looked wrong beside wet clay and sawdust. Busy place. Eleanor continued marking lesson papers. We intend to keep it that way. Rusk watched Jacob Perry unload roofing poles. Jacob, he called, your flower account is still open. Jacob stopped. I know. Just reminding you. Caleb came around the building. People generally remember what they owe. Rusk smiled. Some do. His eyes moved across the volunteers. Folks can spend their days however they please. I simply hope nobody forgets that winter flour is bought in summer. The worksite became quieter. Eleanor understood the message. Rusk never told anyone to leave. He did not need to. He walked toward his wagon, brushing pale flour dust from one cuff. Caleb watched him go. You want me to speak with him? No. He is pressing them. I know. I can stop that. How? Caleb did not answer immediately. Eleanor closed her lesson book. That is why I said no. 2 days later, only half the expected volunteers arrived. Caleb worked longer. Eleanor worked later. They still did not speak about Rusk. The afternoon heat drove the younger children into the shade, while Eleanor helped clear thorn growth behind the relay station. Her shovel struck something hard. Not rock. She scraped away dirt. A flat, dressed stone appeared beneath the weeds. Caleb crouched beside her. There is another. They cleared 3 feet, then 6. The stones formed 2 parallel edges running downhill from the relay station. Eleanor stood. This was a channel. Caleb looked toward the cottonwoods. Old one. How old? Older than my ranch. They followed it. The channel curved behind the school parcel, nearly hidden under hard soil and rabbit brush. At one point, Eleanor found a narrow cut leading south. Another branch disappeared toward the Perry homestead. Caleb stopped smiling. What? He looked farther downhill. I know where this goes. They walked another quarter mile. The channel descended toward the same creek diversion that fed Amos Rusk's mill. Eleanor looked back toward the school. If this still carries water, the school could have a garden. Caleb said nothing. And the Perry place. He nodded. The Martinez place too. Maybe Bell's South Field. Why was it closed? Probably stopped being maintained after the relay station shut down. Then we restore it. Caleb looked at her. No. The answer came too quickly. Eleanor rested both hands on the shovel. You have a reason. Rusk. He owns the mill. Not the creek. He controls the diversion gate. That is different. To Rusk it is not. Caleb walked along the channel. If we reopen this, he will claim we are taking mill water. Then he will drag the school into a ditch dispute while the inspector is counting windows and measuring doors. So we bury it again? I did not say that. You said no. I said no because you had been looking at it for 30 seconds. Eleanor stepped closer. And how long do you need? Caleb stared toward the neighboring homesteads. The Perry well had gone shallow twice that summer. Martinez had been hauling drinking water every 3rd day. A permanent school meant little if families eventually had to leave the valley. He knew that. Eleanor knew he knew it. If we open the channel, Caleb said, we may lose workers. We already are. Rusk may challenge the school site. Then we answer him. He may delay inspection. Then we make delay harder than approval. Caleb glanced at her. That sounded like something I would say. Do not look pleased. He was. They returned with shovels the next morning. Caleb made no speech. He simply stepped into the old channel and began cutting through packed earth. Eleanor joined him. By noon, 3 families had come. By late afternoon, the stone course was exposed from the relay station to the upper bend. Caleb found the old intake packed with roots and clay. He drove the shovel beneath the blockage. Ready? Eleanor stood farther down the channel. Do it. He lifted. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then muddy water slipped between the stones. A narrow stream formed. Children ran beside it, shouting as it moved toward the school. Eleanor followed until the channel curved downhill. The water passed the classroom, past the garden ground, then continued toward the lower fields. She walked faster. At the ridge, she stopped. Below her, the restored channel ran directly toward Amos Rusk's diversion works, and beside the gate stood Amos Rusk himself, watching the water come. Amos Rusk did not come to the school with a gun or a threat. He came carrying 3 folded account sheets and the old ditch agreement that kept his mill turning through the driest months. By sunset, 4 families had stopped working on Eleanor's school. Rusk never ordered them away. He only reminded each one what winter flour would cost if their summer debts remained unpaid. The next morning, Eleanor counted 9 volunteers instead of 17. Caleb stood beside the unfinished window frames and watched Jacob Perry unhitch his mule team. "You leaving?" Jacob kept his eyes on the harness. "Rusk says my account comes due Friday." It was due in October. "Not anymore." Caleb looked toward the mill road. "How much?" Jacob finally looked at him. "Do not." Caleb said nothing. Jacob rubbed the mule's neck. "If you pay it, I owe you instead." "That is not what I meant. It is what happens." Eleanor heard the exchange from the doorway. By noon, 2 more families had gone home. Inside the school, 1 wall still needed plaster. 3 windows lacked frames. Half the roof had not been sealed against rain. 12 days remained. Caleb found Eleanor mixing lime wash behind the building. "I can clear every account Rusk is holding." She kept stirring. "No. It would cost less than losing a week of labor." "No." His shovel stopped. "These people are being squeezed." "I know. Then let me remove the pressure." Eleanor set the mixing paddle across the barrel. "And replace it with what?" "Nothing. With you." Caleb stared at her. She wiped white paste from her wrist. "They leave Rusk owing him money and come back because you paid it. Next year, if you dislike something the school does, what protects them from wondering whether they owe you obedience? I gave this school away." "Then keep giving it away." His face changed. Not anger exactly. Something tighter. "I am trying to help. So am I. You have a remarkable way of making help sound like a crime. And you have a remarkable way of making ownership sound like kindness." The words stayed between them. Caleb put down the shovel. "Finish without my money, then." He walked toward his horse. Eleanor watched him mount. She almost called after him. She did not. For the next 3 days, Caleb did not come to the relay station. Roof poles arrived from his ranch. So did nails. A wagon brought 2 finished window frames with instructions from Caleb to install them on the north wall. But Caleb himself stayed away. Eleanor noticed every absence. She also refused to turn it into an argument she had already finished. Instead, she gathered the remaining families inside the nearly completed classroom. "We are changing the plan." Mrs. Barlow frowned. "Again?" "We finish what the inspector measures first. Roof, doors, windows, floor. The garden waits." "What about the channel?" Jacob asked. "We protect it and prove it later." A farmer near the back shook his head. "Rusk says there is nothing to prove." Eleanor unrolled the maintenance sheet she had been preparing. "He also says this is Mr. Mercer's school." Several people looked toward Caleb's empty place near the doorway. Eleanor pinned the sheet to the wall. It listed every household contributing labor. Beside each was a rotating responsibility for repairs, firewood, cleaning, and water channel maintenance. Caleb Mercer's name appeared once. Land contribution. Nothing more. Jacob read the page twice. "You did not make him trustee?" "No." "He donated 6 acres." "Yes." "And he agreed to this?" "He agreed before the first wall was touched." That afternoon, Jacob returned with his mule team. 2 other families came the next morning. Caleb returned near sundown. No one announced him. He entered while Eleanor was measuring the southern window opening. He stopped at the maintenance sheet. His eyes moved down the names, then to his own. Land contribution. He remained there long enough for Eleanor to notice. You could have put the ranch on the repair rotation, he said. You promised the ranch would not control the school. That does not mean I cannot fix a roof. You can. Then why am I not listed? Because I need to know whether you will come when nobody can require you to. Caleb looked at her. The irritation he had carried inside seemed to lose its footing. He took off his hat. I deserved that. Eleanor returned to her measuring. You deserved part of it. That generous? No. A corner of his mouth moved. He crossed the room and picked up the other end of her measuring cord. What needs doing? The next morning they followed the restored channel together. Not the upper section near the school. All of it. Caleb carried a survey rod. Eleanor carried her chalk line and notebook. The water was shut off, leaving only a dark trace between the stones. Half a mile below the relay station, Caleb stopped. A waist-high boundary stone stood beneath a cottonwood. Its upper edge had been shaped flat. Eleanor brushed dirt from its base. There is another. Farther down stood a second marker, then a third. The channel passed inside the markers before descending toward Rusk's mill. Eleanor crouched beside a narrow branch cut. This one goes to Perry. Caleb nodded. Another branch ran south toward the Martinez homestead. A third, almost buried, angled toward Bell's field. These are old, Eleanor said. Older than any fence here. So Rusk's gate does not create the use. No, it controls the flow. Caleb looked downhill. That is the difference we need. They spent the day measuring the grade. Eleanor marked each branch point. Caleb checked how much water the upper channel could carry without touching the mill's primary race. By afternoon, their argument had become a plan. Not to claim Rusk's water, to demonstrate that limited overflow had long been distributed before the mill channel received the rest. They arranged a preliminary flow test for the following morning. 3 families agreed to stand at their branch cuts, not as surprise witnesses, as people who had already worked on the channel and knew where the water went. At sunrise, Caleb lifted the upper plug. Nothing moved. He waited. Eleanor walked downstream. The channel remained dry. At the lower bend, she saw why. Rusk's adjustable gate had been pulled shut. Caleb joined her. He closed it during the night. Eleanor looked toward the mill. We can ask him to open it. He will refuse. Then the inspector sees a closed gate. If the inspector arrives on schedule. Caleb glanced toward the northern road. He had another problem waiting. His west pasture was nearly bare. 200 cattle needed moving before the week ended. His foreman had sent word that morning. Caleb was supposed to lead the drive. Eleanor knew it. You should go. No. The ranch needs you. The ranch needs somebody who knows the route. That is you. It is also Daniel. Your foreman? Caleb nodded. You trust him with 200 cattle? He looked at the dry channel. I am learning to stop calling something trust only when I am the one holding it. He sent Daniel the instructions that afternoon. Caleb stayed. For 2 days, he and Eleanor prepared the route the inspector would walk. They cleared every branch cut, marked the school parcel, measured the channel depth, listed which families would maintain which section. No secret paper appeared. No forgotten owner emerged. Everything they had was already under their boots. On the 12th evening, Eleanor stood inside the finished classroom. The roof was sealed. Windows latched. Door straight. Caleb pulled the chalk line across the floor to mark where benches would stand. 1 day left, Eleanor said. Enough. A wagon sounded outside. Too late for volunteers. Caleb stepped through the doorway. A territorial seal was painted on the wagon door. The inspector climbed down. Behind him, farther along the channel, Amos Rusk stood beside the closed diversion gate. Eleanor looked toward the stone course. It was completely dry. The inspector checked his watch. I was able to come a day early, he said. Shall we begin? The inspector stepped into the dry channel before he stepped into the school. Eleanor noticed that first. He crouched near the relay station, pressed 2 fingers against the exposed stone, then looked toward the lower diversion. "Where is the water?" "Closed off," Amos Rusk said. He stood beside the gate with his coat buttoned despite the heat. "The school has no lawful claim to it." Caleb walked down from the classroom. "This is not about claiming your mill race." Rusk rubbed flour dust from his cuff. "It becomes my business when somebody opens an abandoned ditch and takes water from the same diversion." The inspector looked at Eleanor. "You requested approval for a permanent school." "Yes." "Is water access required for the building?" "Not for the classroom itself." Rusk smiled slightly. Eleanor continued. "But the dispute affects 3 families supporting this district. If they cannot remain on their land, the school loses children and maintenance labor." The inspector stood. "So show me the dispute." Rusk frowned. "There is nothing to show." Eleanor picked up her notebook. "There is almost a mile of stonework to show. They began at the relay station." Caleb walked beside Eleanor, but did not speak for her. She showed the inspector where the restored channel crossed the 6-acre parcel, then where the first narrow branch turned toward the Perry homestead. Jacob Perry waited there. The inspector pointed toward the cut. "You use this?" "When water reaches it." "For how long?" Jacob shrugged. "My father used it before I owned the place." Rusk stepped forward. "That proves habit, not priority." Eleanor nodded. "He is right." Rusk looked surprised. She continued walking. At the next branch, Mrs. Martinez stood beside a shallow trough. The inspector asked the same questions. She gave the same kind of answer. No one claimed ownership of the creek. No one claimed Rusk had stolen anything. They described where water had gone, when enough water existed to reach them. At the 3rd branch, Caleb stopped beside the old boundary stone. "This marker follows the relay parcel." The inspector examined it. "Who said it?" "Before my family owned the ranch." "You have records?" "Not with me." Rusk smiled again. Caleb pointed down. "But the channel does not need a record to show which direction it runs." The inspector followed the stone course with his eyes. The branch cuts came before the mill race. The grade fell gradually through the school parcel and neighboring fields, before narrowing toward Rusk's diversion. Eleanor opened her notebook. "We measured the upper channel for 2 days." She showed the inspector the marked depths and distances. If the gate is adjusted instead of fully closed, the first overflow reaches these branch cuts. The main flow continues to the mill. Rusk folded his arms. "My mill has priority." "We are not disputing that," Eleanor said. "You are reopening a channel that changes my supply. Then open the gate enough to demonstrate it." "No." The inspector looked at him. Rusk's jaw shifted. "I will not damage my business to satisfy a schoolteacher's experiment." Caleb stepped toward the gate. Eleanor caught his sleeve. He stopped. That small restraint mattered more than any argument. Caleb looked at Rusk. "This school stands on land I donated." Rusk said, "Exactly." Caleb shook his head. "No, that is the mistake." He turned toward the inspector. "The land came from my ranch. The school does not belong to my ranch." Eleanor released his sleeve. The inspector looked back toward the channel. "Mr. Rusk, your mill priority does not give you authority to block every secondary use simply because you control the gate." Rusk's face tightened. "You intend to order me?" "I intend to observe the existing diversion with the gate operating normally." Rusk did not move. The inspector waited. Several seconds passed. Then Rusk walked to the wheel. He turned it slowly. Wood groaned. Water pushed beneath the gate. At first it was only a dark line. Then the upper stone course filled. Everyone followed. Water reached the relay parcel. It passed the school. At Perry's branch, a small portion turned away. The main stream continued. At Martinez, another shallow ribbon separated. The rest moved downhill. By the time they reached the mill race, water was still running strongly through it. The inspector watched the wheel begin to turn. Rusk said nothing. He did not need to. The result stood in front of him. Back at the school, the inspector checked the windows, roof braces, floor, stove clearance, and door. Eleanor answered every question. Caleb remained near the rear wall. At last, the inspector closed his notebook. The building passes. Nobody cheered immediately. Eleanor simply lowered her shoulders and looked toward the open doorway. Then Jacob laughed. The sound broke the room loose. The inspector raised one hand. One matter remains. Channel maintenance. He looked at Caleb. Since the parcel originated from Mercer Ranch, ranch authority could supervise the upper section. Caleb glanced at Eleanor. A month earlier, he would have accepted before the sentence ended. No. The inspector waited. Caleb nodded toward the maintenance sheet on the wall. The family's already divided the work. You are declining control? I am keeping my agreement. Rusk looked toward him. For once, Caleb did not care. The inspector added a note. Then the committee arrangement stands. Rusk retained his mill priority. He kept the mill. He kept the lawful part of what had always been his. What he lost was the ability to close the gate simply because everyone downstream feared challenging him. By evening, most people had gone. One unfinished window frame remained on the south wall. Caleb lifted it into place. Eleanor held the lower corner. You could have taken the maintenance authority, she said. I know. You wanted to. I know that too. She drove one nail. Caleb steadied the frame. For years, I thought a promise was safe only if I could finish it myself. Eleanor checked the level. And I had 200 cattle moved this week without me. She looked at him. Terrifying. Nearly unbearable. She smiled. He placed another nail. Are you staying after this school year? Eleanor's smile faded into something quieter. If we understand the terms. Caleb rested the hammer against the sill. What terms? Anything we build together belongs equally to both of us. He looked around the classroom, then at her. I can live with those terms. So can I. The school opened the following Monday. 23 children filled the repaired adobe room. No plaque carried Caleb's name. No speech praised Eleanor. She stood at the front and began the morning lesson. Caleb sat near the back until she handed him a stack of slates and pointed toward a crooked shelf. He fixed it. By spring, there were 31 students. By then, Caleb and Eleanor were married. One evening, after the last child had gone home, Eleanor carried 2 stakes outside. Caleb followed with the carpenter's chalk line. A second classroom was needed. Eleanor drove the first stake into the earth. Caleb walked backward across the schoolyard, pulling the blue cord tight, while 3 older students held the remaining stakes straight. Eleanor sighted along the line. 2 inches left. Caleb moved. She raised one hand. Square. Together they lifted the cord and snapped a clean blue mark across the ground. If you enjoy quiet frontier romances built through earned trust and shared choices, subscribe and leave a like for the next Wild West story.